At exactly 2:47 p.m., a Ukrainian gunship carried out a maneuver that defied every established principle of aerial warfare. Instead of avoiding danger, it pushed directly into the kill zone of a Russian missile detachment, flying at low altitude and sluggish speed, almost inviting destruction. The Russian operators were stunned at their fortune. Before them was an Mi-24 Hind bristling with rockets, blatantly exposed in full daylight above a seemingly inactive stretch of the front. From a tactical standpoint, it looked nonsensical, unless provoking enemy fire was the real objective. This particular sector around Olski had seen little more than drone flights and the occasional artillery strike for months. Yet here was a prized Mi-24 assault helicopter burdened with 4 B-8V rocket pods, entering disputed skies at treetop level where it was most vulnerable. Each pod housed 20 S-8 unguided rockets, giving the aircraft a total payload of 80. Every 80-millimeter rocket weighed 11.7 kilograms, armed with a 1.1-kilogram warhead capable of breaching 400 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. But sending such a heavily armed gunship here was like unleashing a professional NFL linebacker against a children's team. It looked absurdly mismatched. At least, that's how the Russians interpreted it. And their interpretation was all that mattered. Roughly 3.2 kilometers away, concealed in a building, a two-man Russian MANPADS unit had been monitoring the helicopter's flight path with binoculars for nearly 4 minutes. They were armed with the 9K-38 Igla system, one of Russia's most formidable shoulder-launched anti-air weapons. The system, weighing 17.9 kilograms in its ready state, carried a missile 1.5 meters in length with a 1.17-kilogram charge loaded with 390 grams of explosive, more than enough to reduce a helicopter to flaming wreckage. But what truly threatened the Mi-24 wasn't the warhead. It was the missile's guidance. The 9 M39's cryogenically cooled infrared seeker represented a leap beyond earlier models, using nitrogen to cut sensor noise and sharpen detection range. This cooling allowed the seeker to distinguish engine exhaust from basic decoy flares, at least in theory. The engagement unfolded as the Ukrainian pilot nosed into a dive and unleashed his full arsenal in a massive ripple-fire sequence. Dozens of rockets screamed earthward at 610 meters per second, blanketing a half-kilometer zone. Yet something was off. Many slammed harmlessly into the Dnipro River. Others tore up empty fields, while only a small number hit actual buildings. It looked less like a precision strike and more like indiscriminate area fire. An odd waste of firepower in such a quiet theater. But the wide 500-meter spread wasn't random. It served a hidden purpose: to compel an air defense unit to reveal itself. Any trained MANPADS crew watching such a sloppy run would feel obliged to take the shot at what seemed like a careless target. The Russian operators followed doctrine precisely. According to Soviet-era manuals, crews were instructed to engage any enemy aircraft within the Igla's 5.2-kilometer range. The gunner ran one last check of his system. The weapon was designed to hit aircraft flying as fast as 8 kilometers per second and as high as 3.5 kilometers. The Mi-24, moving slowly and low, was well inside its engagement envelope. But the angle of attack revealed a critical detail. The helicopter had intentionally crossed into occupied airspace. From their position, the Igla's 5.2-kilometer range couldn't even span the Dnipro, meaning the Ukrainians had exposed themselves deliberately just to provoke a missile launch. Why would they risk such an expensive platform in daylight over a zone known to have air defense coverage? Olski held no major strategic value. Few troops, no vital infrastructure, nothing requiring immediate suppression. That alone should have warned the Russians. Yet the temptation of a vulnerable helicopter overrode caution. The trap was complete. At 2:48 p.m., as the final rockets detonated below, the Russian operator pressed the trigger. The seeker locked onto the Mi-24's exhaust plume, and with a sharp white flash, the solid fuel motor ignited. The missile ripped into the sky at nearly Mach 1.9, maintaining firm lock thanks to its cooled seeker, even against the afternoon glare. Inside the helicopter, the SPO-15 Berioza radar warning receiver immediately picked up the launch, though the pilot's calm reaction suggested he was expecting it. The SPO-15 scanned a broad frequency spectrum from 0.66 to 17 GHz, detecting hostile radar emissions and missile seeker activity. 4 antennas positioned around the aircraft provided complete 360-degree coverage, with bearing accuracy within 15 degrees. The system's vast threat library cataloged over 600 known signatures, instantly tagging them by weapon type. It didn't just detect danger, it prioritized threats on a 16-light display, combining direction and severity, while piping unique audio tones for each weapon system. A steady 800 Hz audio tone signals that hostile radar has locked onto the aircraft. A pulsing 1600 Hz warning means a missile launch, while rapid chirping denotes the seeker entering terminal homing. In this instance, the shrill pulsing 1600 Hz alert leaves no doubt. An infrared missile is inbound. Exactly the scenario the pilot anticipated. The Mi-24 banks sharply left, while simultaneously triggering its countermeasure system, ejecting a carefully programmed salvo of 12 infrared flares in quick bursts. The UV-26 countermeasure dispenser, mounted on the helicopter's fuselage, carries a total of 192 PPI-26 cartridges. Each flare burns at over 2,000 degrees Celsius, producing intense infrared signatures engineered to draw missile seekers away from the hot exhaust plumes of the Heinz twin engines. The timing is flawless. In a split second, the battle space becomes a chaotic inferno of false signals. 80 detonating rockets on the ground produce a blazing curtain of heat sources, while above, 12 white-hot flares blossom like miniature suns. A seeker designed to track a single thermal target now confronts dozens. It is the equivalent of trying to pick out one light bulb in Times Square at midnight, an impossible task. Each S-8 rocket strike generates secondary heat emissions lasting several seconds as vegetation, fuel, and scattered debris ignite, leaving behind multiple infrared hotspots across the 500-meter strike zone. When combined with the helicopter's deployed flares, the result is a layered three-dimensional grid of thermal clutter. A seeker built in the 1980s simply lacks the processing to separate genuine targets from decoys. Confused, the missile's logic abandons the helicopter's exhaust signature and veers toward the brightest source available, a cluster of burning impacts roughly 150 meters away. The weapon flashes harmlessly past the Hind, close enough for the crew to see, yet far enough for the proximity fuse to remain ineffective. This miss, however, was never a surprise. It was part of the plan. The true success is what follows. The missile launch plume, a glaring infrared beacon, instantly reveals the Russian team's firing position. Ukrainian electronic warfare units combine that signature with intercepted communications emissions, pinpointing the launch site down to the building. Within 90 seconds, Ukrainian signals intelligence completes the targeting solution. What once required up to half an hour in older conflicts is now compressed into barely a minute and a half thanks to networked sensors and streamlined digital command links. As soon as processing ends, the coordinates are transmitted directly to an FPV drone operator stationed 8 kilometers away. This illustrates a radical shift in doctrine. Instead of avoiding enemy air defense zones, Ukrainian crews deliberately expose themselves, using their aircraft as bait to compel Russian teams into firing. Countermeasures and calculated risk replace traditional helicopter doctrine of terrain masking and standoff engagement. What would once be considered reckless has become a strategy designed to eliminate air defenses at their source. It is a gamble conventional militaries would rarely endorse, but in practice, it has proven devastatingly effective. The Mi-24, once a vulnerable target, becomes the lure that transforms Igla crews into prey. The Russian operators, meanwhile, proceed with their post-launch checklist, unaware that their fate is sealed, the clock already ticking down from 8 minutes. Soviet-era doctrine dictated immediate relocation after firing, the shoot-and-scoot principle, which provided relative safety when response times stretched into tens of minutes. Modern integrated intelligence networks have compressed those response windows to single digits. At 2:49 p.m., confirmation reaches the drone team, a modified commercial quadcopter, outwardly indistinguishable from civilian models, but now carrying a 1.5-kilogram explosive charge in place of a gimbal, powers up. It climbs to just 50 meters, skimming low to avoid detection as it heads toward the Russian firing point. The Igla crew is still bogged down in their teardown routine. The launcher tube must be detached from the gripstock. The spent coolant battery has to be disposed of safely. The thermal power cell must be removed. Every piece must be packed away properly into carrying kits. Under perfect conditions, this procedure takes 4 to 6 minutes, but in the mud-slick terrain of the Dnipro Delta, it becomes a grueling task. Boots sink into muck. Stairs splinter beneath the weight of nearly 18 kilograms of gear, and focus on equipment eclipses situational awareness. Ukrainian forces identified this post-launch vulnerability window early in the war. During these minutes, MANPADS crews are locked into task fixation, dismantling complex systems and blind to their surroundings, precisely the weakness drone operators trained to exploit. The decentralized nature of Ukrainian command enables this lightning-fast chain. Instead of routing targeting data up multiple layers of command, operators receive coordinates directly and act without delay. Decision cycles that once stretched half an hour are now compressed to less than 2 minutes. The choice of Oleski as the operational stage was deliberate. In busier sectors, a single MANPADS launch might blend into the noise of constant battle. But here, in a quiet zone, one missile immediately draws attention and rapid reprisal. Ukrainian command ensured the engagement would send a clear message. At 2:54 p.m., just 6 minutes after the Igla was fired, the FPV drone nears its unsuspecting target. Through the drone's first-person camera, the operator watches as 2 Russian soldiers remain at their launch site, still wrestling with their gear. The 17.9-kilogram Igla launcher, cumbersome even under normal conditions, proves nearly impossible to handle quickly in the swampy terrain. The drone's flight path is optimized to ensure maximum effectiveness while keeping the chance of detection at a minimum. Flying at just 50 meters above the ground keeps it beneath the minimum detection thresholds of most radar systems. Its compact frame and plastic body produce an almost negligible radar return. Unlike fuel-driven aircraft, the quadcopter's electric motors